Okay, so hopping right into it today, we're going to be doing our week 2 wide receiver rankings and tiers. Before I hop into the actual video, real quick, just wanted to point this out. I am doing them as tiers because I cannot predict every player perfectly. I am not omniscient. I am not able to see the future. So, just with that in mind, just realize it's not going to be exactly perfect, but it's going to be pretty dang close, hopefully week to week, as we get more information on these offensive units, their usage, and also the defenses they're going up against. It'll be even more accurate as we go forward. All right, so hopping right into it. At number 1, I do have Jamar Chase. I know in week 1, the Bengals did not look very good. It was one of their worst offensive performances in a very long time. So my anticipation for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins is for them to have a much better week this coming week. You can throw Chase Brown in there as well, so I have him comfortably at number 1. At number 2, I have CeeDee Lamb going up against the New York Giants. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to bounce back this week. I know he had a good week in fantasy last week, but with those drops, I just anticipate seeing him catching almost every ball that's thrown at him and just being like a very dominant figure. I can't imagine somebody with his personality isn't coming into week 2 like, hey, Dad, give me the ball. I'm going to catch him, and I'm going to score a bajillion points. Maybe not a bajillion points, but probably a touchdown and just smash in week 2. All right, so at number 3, I have Drake London. He is going up against the Vikings this week. I think their defense will play better in week 2. Van Ginkel is going to be out. One of their starting corners, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, is going to be out. So he is going to have a little bit easier of a matchup. The biggest thing for Drake London is in week 1, he had 15 targets. Michael Penix threw the ball 42 times. I don't know if we see that exact same usage in week 2, but if he's going to get this many opportunities with Michael Penix, he's going to be a smash guy in fantasy football pretty much every single week. Darnell Mooney is coming back, so he might lose some of those targets to him. He's just going to dominate like he did last week. At number 4, I have Puka Nacua. He's going up against the Titans this week. They are without Sweat, so they might be able to run the ball a little bit more against the Titans. But again, number 1 target earner for his team, schemed up touches. Puka Nacua is just a dominant figure. As long as he stays healthy and can keep his eyes and head and face, in check and not getting beat up and bloodied up, then he's going to smash again in week 2. At number 5, I have Nico Collins. In week 1, he underwhelmed. Not enough targets, and the targets he got were absolute crap. I'm hoping and betting on him and this Texans offense to bounce back in week 2. CJ Stroud is going to look better. I believe Nico Collins is going to get an abundance of targets because they didn't get it to him enough, and they ended up losing that Rams game. So I think he will be a pivotal focus point for this Texans team in week 2 against an easier matchup with the Buccaneers. At number 6, I have Brian Thomas Jr. The Panthers are going up against the Bengals this week. They do not have a fantastic defense. We saw Joe Flacco be able to exploit some matchups and some opportunities down the field in week 1. If that's what Joe Flacco can do, I have faith in Trevor Lawrence to be able to actually get the ball to Brian Thomas Jr. this week with a lot of overthrows in week 1, which is why his performance wasn't that great. Liam Cohen did scheme him up for a running touchdown in week 1, so I know he's going to be actively involved. And if he's going to scheme him up that way in a game where he's not that involved, then I think you're just going to see a lot of game scripts where even if he's not getting a bajillion targets or a bajillion catches in that given week, I think Liam Cohen, very similar to how Ben Johnson last year for Amon-Ra, even if he wasn't really getting involved in the passing game, he's going to find a way to get him involved in the game and make sure that he's a part of it some way, somehow. At number 7, I have Justin Jefferson. J.J. McCarthy, week 1, as the game went along, it looked a little bit better. I'm hoping in week 2 we see a step up in J.J. McCarthy's production and that Justin Jefferson is just the big beneficiary of that. For all of these guys in the 1 through 12, it's kind of hard to move any of them outside of the first 12, in my opinion, especially like a week over week thing. So this is where I have him this week. Next for me is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm just anticipating that this entire offensive unit for the Lions looks better in week 2. I cannot imagine that Dan Campbell is going to play Ben Johnson in their first head-to-head matchup and not throw everything in the kitchen sink at him. I just think Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best target earner on this team, and he's going to be overly involved throughout the game, and Jared Goff and the offensive line will actually click a little bit more in week 2 as well. So at number 9, I have Ladd McConkey going up against the Raiders this week. Justin Herbert looked fantastic. I'm hopeful, very, very hopeful, that we see him play at that same level, that Jim Harbaugh wants him to come out there and sling the ball like that again. And with the complement of QJ catching the ball and Keenan Allen being involved, it does take a little bit of pressure off him. It means that the coverage can't just hone in on him because there are other target earners that are capable of catching the ball. I think this will actually elevate Ladd McConkey's season in fantasy football as a whole and not take away as much as people out there might be assuming it's going to happen as we go throughout the season. At number 10, I have Malik Neighbors. I have him lower this week, and it's not because of Malik. It is because of Russell Wilson. I do not like Russ. I'm not a fan of Russ at this point in time in his career. His inaccuracy was absolutely abysmal in week one. There were so many times where I'm watching the ball get thrown over Malik Neighbors' head. That to me is a terrifying thought, because that shouldn't be happening 4 or 5 times during the game. I'm hoping he gets a little bit more honed in. Malik Neighbors is still going to get a lot of targets in week 2. They're going up against the Dallas Cowboys, so I'm anticipating it's going to be a decently high scoring game by the Cowboys, which puts the Giants in a pass script pretty much the entire game. At number 11, I have AJ Brown. Oh, AJ Brown. It's just hard because the Eagles don't realize what they have at the wide receiver position as far as I'm concerned. Obviously in week 1, absolutely horrible. 1 target, 1 reception, 8 yards. I am hoping in this game against the Chiefs, who do not let you run the ball very well, that is kind of what their defense did last year, and in week 1 it kind of looked the same way against the Chargers. I'm hoping that Saquon cannot get it going, that they have to get the ball to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Dallas Goedert, I believe, is going to be out for this game, so he cannot safety blanket pass it down. Jalen Hurts, that is. He can't safety blanket pass it down to Dallas Goedert, so he's going to have to get A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith involved. A.J. Brown is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, so hopefully in week 2 we see a bounce back game. It's against the Chiefs. It should be a very intense, important game for the Eagles, just like it is for the Chiefs, so I'm hoping he is just smashing in week 2. Next for me at number 12, I have JSN. JSN flashed in week 1. Looks like Sam Darnold is going to do exactly kind of what I thought and just throw him the ball. The protection, though, for the Seahawks was a lot better than what I thought it was going to be coming into the season. So that is going to be a huge beneficial thing for JSN, because if Sam Darnold has time, he will get the ball to him. He's going up against the Steelers this week, who last week against Garrett Wilson and those wide receivers from the Jets looked pretty abysmal. They could have a little bit of a bounce back, but JSN's still going to be the number 1 target earner on this team. And if he can do even kind of what Garrett Wilson did, he's going to easily be a top 12 guy in fantasy football in week 2. So at number 13, ironically enough, I have Garrett Wilson going up against the Bills this week. Number 1, should be a high-scoring game. Looks like both of these defenses did not come to play this season, but obviously that was just week 1, so we'll see. Number 2, there's been a decent amount of injuries to the Bills defense from week 1 to week 2, so I think he's going to be in a pretty good smash spot. If we can see Justin Fields and Aaron Glenn play and scheme up a good game plan against the Bills, there's a good reality where Garrett Wilson could actually again finish inside of the top 12. That's why I have him comfortably at number 13, just to have him close to being a wide receiver 1, but just out of there at wide receiver 13. Wide receiver number 14, I have Courtland Sutton. He absolutely flashed in week 1, and I guess flashed probably isn't a fair thing because he flashed all of last season, but even in a week where Bo Nix did not play well, he was overly involved. He was very active. He looked really good. So I'm hoping in a week 2 against a Colts defense that's not that great, not that bad, but against the Colts offense, it looks like they're going to come out to play every single week, and Daniel Jones is going to get the ball all over the field. Hopefully it is a little bit higher of a scoring game than the Broncos defense would hope for, which would set up Courtland Sutton to be, again, the number 1 target earner in a higher to middle scoring game. Kind of a smash spot for him if that kind of works out that way. So at wide receiver 15, I have T. Higgins. Kind of the same notes from Jamar Chase. He's just going to be involved. Bengals are going to look better. Joe Burrow is going to play better. It's pretty much all I really have. At wide receiver 16, we have Mike Evans going up against the Houston Texans. Mike Evans looked decent enough in week 1. I'm hoping that he gets a little bit more involved, that Baker looks a little bit better. This offensive line looks a little bit better. He should be the 1A option on this team to Emeka Buka's 1B. I just think this could end up being a lower scoring game, but I don't think that you're going to see the Bucs be able to run the ball very well against the front 4 of the Houston Texans. I think this just sets it up where Baker has to throw the ball a lot like he did in week 1. At wide receiver 17, I have Terry McLaurin. Obviously, this game has already passed and happened, but again, this is where I had him. So didn't play that well, wasn't as involved as I would have liked. I kind of am concerned about this Commanders offense a little bit. Cliff Kingsbury's play calling looked kind of stale. As I've said before, I'm not going to adjust my rankings because a game already happened and I haven't filmed the video yet. I'm not going to move him way down or anything. I don't believe in doing that. So this is where I had him. He would have been somebody you're going to start no matter what. You drafted him to start him. There's no bye weeks. This is just where he should have been in my opinion, but this is not where he ended up. We'll see how it looks going into week 3. At wide receiver 18, I have DK Metcalf going up against the Seattle Seahawks. I probably have him a little bit higher than other people out there. I know that this probably isn't going to be the highest of scoring games, they probably won't have to pass the ball a bunch of times. I do think, though, the Seattle front four will make it really hard for the Steelers to run the football. I don't think Jaylen Warren's going to have that good of a week, or anybody in the backfield for the Steelers. So I think that is going to designate that they have to pass the ball a little bit more than they probably wanted to coming into this game. DK Metcalf's going to have a revenge game too. That's kind of what I'm seeing right here. I can see Aaron Rodgers being like, hey dude, like this is my last season in the NFL. This is your revenge game. I've had these revenge games. Like this is your chance right here and right now to pop off, show the Seahawks they're idiots. And I just am hoping and believing that DK Metcalf is going to have a fantastic week in week 2. At wide receiver 19, I have Devontae Adams. Rams going up against the Titans, probably not going to be the highest of scoring games, but with that being said, Devontae is an elite talent. Matthew Stafford tried getting him the ball quite a few times during the game, so I did like seeing that he was targeted quite a bit. He did have a few drops out there, and I'm hoping the Rams have the ability to move the ball down the field better against the Titans than they did last week. If that ends up being the case, Devontae Adams could be the red zone target earner for this team. As far as receiving the ball, we just don't know yet, but I am hopeful that we get to see a little flash of that in week 2. On the flip side of that same matchup, I have Calvin Ridley. When it comes to Calvin Ridley, he looked really bad in week 1 against the Broncos, but he's getting covered by Patrick Surtain and the litany of corners and safeties from the Denver Broncos. The Rams are not going to be a top 5 defense. I'm hoping in week 2 that Cam Ward's like, hey, Calvin Ridley's got to get involved early and often. He's going to be the number 1 target earner on this team. He's not going to have drops like he did in week 1. So I'm hoping in week 2 we can solidify Calvin Ridley as pretty much a wide receiver 2 on a week-over-week basis. So at wide receiver 21, I have Teddarone McMillan. He is going up against the Arizona Cardinals this week. They do have Budda Baker over there for the Cardinals in the safety position, so that may be a little bit of a matchup to watch. For me, though, Teddarone McMillan in week 1 had one crazy drop down the sideline, one crazy overthrow in the end zone for a touchdown. So I'm hoping that Dave Canales, Bryce Young are like, hey, we got to get this guy going. We got our butts beat in week 1 against the Jaguars. We've got to figure this out. Their defense isn't going to be good. They're going to be in a pass-heavy script probably every single game. So I'm anticipating that T-Mac's going to pop off this week, end up being a wide receiver 2, catch those balls that he may have dropped or had overthrown in week 1 that'll get a little bit more cleaned up. He very well could be towards the high end of a wide receiver 2, but again, he's somebody you're going to be starting no matter what. Anyways, at wide receiver 22, I have Tyreek Hill. I have him right here as a little bit of a show of respect because obviously in week 1 against the Colts, the Dolphins looked horrible. Tua looked horrible. Tyreek looked like he just had bad body language. I'm hoping for his sake and fantasy owners of him out there that he bounces back a little bit in week 2. He can solidify himself as a wide receiver 2 in my rankings and tiers going forward. Christian Gonzalez is still going to be out, so the number 1 corner is not available. Tyreek Hill, if there's a week for him to eat and have a bounce back with this Dolphins team, hopefully it is in week 2. If it looks like it did in week 1, at the end of week 2, then he's going to be more of a wide receiver 3 flex option at best, just because until the Dolphins get it going, then it's hard to rank him higher. So I'm hoping that I don't look like an idiot having him here this high in week 2. At wide receiver 23, I have Jerry Jeudy. He had a few bad drops and a lot of PIs against him in week 1 against the Bengals. I'm hoping in week 2 he continues to get the same amount of targets and that they're a little bit higher quality targets from Joe Flacco. This game has the potential to be a very high scoring game. If that is the case and the Browns run offense looks as bad as it did in week 1, they should have to pass the ball a lot. If that ends up happening, it's a little bit of a Joe Flacco revenge game. Jerry Jeudy could pop off, end up being more of like a high-end wide receiver 2, so I safely have him here because of the game script and because I think they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. At wide receiver number 23, I have Emeka Egbuka going up against the Houston Texans. So if we assume that Mike Evans is going to get the best coverage and the best corners in week 1 and in week 2, that means Emeka Egbuka is getting the second best or third best against him. I think he's an elite talent. He's somebody who last week I said was like a high flex play for me. I did not have him ranked super high because it was week 1, so it's hard to know what we're actually going to see. I'm hoping in week 2 he takes another step up, handful more targets, better targets from Baker, get some touchdown equity in this game as well. Somebody that I'm wanting to start in my league if I have him at the wide receiver position. At wide receiver 24, I have Zay Flowers. I said it last week, I wasn't going to overreact or if him or Rashad Bateman popped off in week 1. Obviously he did. That was a unique game. The Bills couldn't stop scoring. The Ravens couldn't stop scoring. And eventually he was going to get the ball thrown to him from Lamar. He is going to be involved in the passing game. He should be the number 1 target earner. He's safely a wide receiver 2 for me this week. Again, he's somebody who could be a little bit higher than maybe where I should have him. So again, if you're not feeling comfortable with Zay Flowers, plug and play from the wide receiver 3s I have coming right after him. At wide receiver 25, I have Jakobi Meyers. So my concern for Jakobi Meyers this week and why I don't have him as a wide receiver 2 option is that there may be no Brock Bowers in this game. If that is the case, he is going to draw the majority of the coverage. He's going to draw the majority of the looks in this game. Because if there's no Brock Bowers to take the lid off, if there's no Brock Bowers to have to like, hey, this is the best player on this offense, it kind of shifts over to Jakobi Meyers. The other big concern for Jakobi Meyers in week 2 is the Chargers defense looked pretty good. Obviously, they did allow Hollywood Brown to look decent in week 1, so he probably will have a good game. He's probably somebody, like I said, if you're not comfortable with Calvin Ridley or you're not comfortable with Zay Flowers, you can plug and play him pretty comfortably in your starting lineup as far as I'm concerned for week 2. I do have DJ Moore. When it comes to like these wide receiver 3s, it's a little bit hairier, right? Because it's hard to know what we're going to see out of them in week 2. They look this way in week 1. Are we going to see a difference in week 2? Are they going to look better? Are they going to look worse? So just realize this is probably the tier where this is how I have them ranked, but they could finish in a whole litany of different ways than what I have them ranked for week 2. DJ Moore was actively involved, looked like he was the number 1 target runner at the beginning of the game, and then Rome Odunze kind of came along as it went along. Caleb did go to him in the 4th quarter, so I'm hoping that, with that trust and faith that in week 2, he is kind of more of a flex option for you. Or if you're in a wide receiver 3 league, he's somebody that you're probably going to have to play. They're going up against the Lions. It should be a high-scoring game. Ben Johnson wants to beat the crap out of Dan Campbell. So if there's a week where DJ Moore, Rome Odunze should pop off, it should be this week. So at wide receiver 27, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. He looked pretty good in week 1. Was kind of surprised at how well he looked, considering how last year went. When it comes to this week, though, it is going to be probably more of a run script game for the Cardinals. The Panthers last week gave up a bajillion yards on the ground. I just think it's going to be not a super high scoring game. They're going to be able to run the ball, salt the clock away, and win this game pretty handedly. At wide receiver 28, I have Ricky Pearsall. I do know that Brock Purdy's out. Mac Jones is going to be the starting guy. Don't love it, but he pretty much is the only wide receiver who should be out there. There should be no Juwan Jennings, no George Kittle. I know CMC is still there, but in this week, it really should be CMC. You have to be able to win on the ground against the Saints, whose run defense isn't going to be that great. And Ricky Pearsall, kind of like BTJ last year is what I'm hoping with Mac Jones, looks pretty good in week 2. I will be starting him in my league in a flex position just because I like the matchup and I like the reality of what Mac Jones could potentially do for Ricky Pearsall in week 2. So at wide receiver 29, I have Jameson Williams. I'm anticipating it's a decently high scoring game. The Bears, the Lions, it should be a good matchup. This could be a smash week though for JMO. There is going to be some corners that are missing this game for the Bears, so him and Amon-Ra should eat in week 2. At wide receiver 30, I have Rome Odunze. Again, same matchup, so high scoring game. I have him around where DJ Moore is in my rankings and tiers. I think that Rome Odunze could emerge as more of the wide receiver 1 option for this football team. It really is going to kind of come down to like what we see in week 2, probably week 3. And by the end of week 3, you should have a pretty good idea of how Ben Johnson is going to utilize these wide receivers for the Chicago Bears. At wide receiver 31, I have George Pickens. I had to bump him down a little bit. I didn't like the usage or like the body language out of him in week 1. I think this is a week where we see Dak kind of go back to the well and go back to him a little bit more than we did in week 1. Hopefully he can catch those balls and gets the targets. Again, wide receiver 3 league, you're starting him. Flex option, I'm not quite as comfortable because the game shouldn't be as high scoring against the Giants. At wide receiver 32, I have Chris Olave. So for Chris Olave this week against the 49ers, their secondary isn't going to be that elite. Chris Olave is going to be overly involved. He got quite a few targets in week 1, which is a great sign out of Spencer Rattler. I'm hoping Spencer Rattler in week 2 can take the miniature step up that we need. So there's not passes going to Juwan Johnson, which should never be a thing that we're seeing. It should be funneling through Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Alvin Kamara on this football team. So I have him a lot higher ranked than I did in week 1. So I'm going to look at the tape, see what I see, and adjust players accordingly. So there are all my tiers and rankings for wide receivers in week 2 of fantasy football. Hopefully this video helps you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. And if you're looking for some QB/tight end rankings, running back rankings, I will have at least one of those videos down here below for you as well. Hopefully I'll see you guys again real soon. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day.